Oh, I feel like I get more stuff up from wearing the mask.
I swear every time I put mine on is when I start coughing.
But the smoke is clear today, so that's good.
It was really bad yesterday.
Yeah, it was. They said it was going to be bad until today, but at least this morning it was clear.
I think that wind last night probably helped.
Oh yeah, and this morning too, I thought we were gonna get a storm.
I have another webinar. I'm going to try to read the captions in between watching Orchid.
I knew that you had something else planned too, so if you need a help.
Yeah, it's another one of those standards, methodologies, and performance measures for, I think it's landscape area measurement. I don't know. I can't keep up.
I tried to hop on one yesterday and it's always 10 o'clock is when all the customers call too, so.
I know I was going to get on one yesterday at 10 and then the acupuncturist called and said, oh, I can get you in early. I was like, okay, yeah, I'm going to do that. I was in so much pain.
Oh. I hope we have attendees.
I know last week I was worried about that and I think we ended up with like, I don't know, 15
Yeah,
people.
Yeah.
Not...
Oh, we got one. I shouldn't talk though. I always log in right at the last minute too.
Already joined us. Thanks for joining. We will start.
Feathered earring, Lauren?
Went back to circa 2010. Well, so far we have, looks like maybe 2 attendees. So good morning. Thank you for joining us. We will get started here in just a few minutes, but we'll just give a little bit more time for everyone else to join in. And we'll begin right at 10 o'clock. If you haven't already, now would be a great time to grab some coffee, tea, maybe a water bottle, your notebooks, grab some pens and whatever else you may need to get comfortable. And then again, we'll get started here right at 10 o'clock. Also, feel free to use the Q&A box right now if you have any questions before we begin, or say hello in the chat box. We're happy you're here. We'll get started soon. And Sierra, are you seeing the water, fire, and plant side? All right, great.
Looks good.
Okay, thank you. All right, everyone, welcome. It is 10 o'clock. We are so happy you're here for our rescheduled class on this fourth Wednesday of August. My name is Lauren, and I'm the Water Conservation Specialist here at Big Bear Lake Department of Water. And I am co-hosting the summer series with Water Conservation and Public Information Supervisor, Sierra Orr. Sierra, do you want to say hi?
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us again. I know this was a rescheduled session, so thank you for making it happen.
So with that, thank you for joining us this morning for our WaterWise webinar series, Water and Fire and Plants, Oh My. Today, we are featuring guest speaker and native plant expert, Orchid Black, and she is here to share her knowledge and expertise on building and designing rain gardens and swales in your garden or property. Orchid is a garden designer and owner of Native Sanctuary, which offers native plant consulting and sustainable design services. She has also served on the state board of the California Native Plant Society and is a lecturer for the Theodore Payne Foundation and UCLA Extension. Many of you may recognize her as a familiar face here in Big Bear, as she has also been our featured native plant expert for our Xeriscape garden tours and earthly events. Today is our fourth featured webinar, but actually our sixth session in our webinar series, and a great way to conclude the month of August. Last month, Orchid led a session on Big Bear native plants, and we also heard from Douglas Kent and learned about Firewise landscaping, as well as Laura Allen on the basics of building gray water systems. If you missed the first 2 months of our webinars, we still encourage you to join us this upcoming September for our final 3 classes that are sure to inspire and engage. Webinars are held every first, second, and third Wednesday of the month. First Wednesdays are focused on native plants. Second Wednesdays are focused on Firewise landscaping, and third Wednesdays focus on the use of gray water. Each class is different and will offer something new to bring to your garden and to add to your local expertise about living sustainably here in Big Bear. Just a reminder, attend live for each class if you can, because you may have a chance to win free gifts and books if you are a DWP customer. These sessions are targeted for all Big Bear Valley residents, as well as business and property owners. If you would like to sign up for any upcoming session, please email conservation@bbldwp.com We also post the registration links on our Facebook page, so be sure to follow us there. Last but not least, we do want to make sure this is an interactive session, so please feel free to utilize the Q&A and chat at any point. If questions are answered live, we will note that. And then if they don't get answered during Orchid's presentation, we'll make sure to address your questions at the end. During the Q&A session, if you prefer to speak, raise your hand and we should be able to unmute you at that time. And then just one last little plug and a fantastic way to take advantage of the current incentives we're offering right now. All BBL VW customers are eligible to receive a free rain barrel, one per account. You can email me or call for the details. We also have $50 rain barrel rebates available if you prefer to purchase your own. And also don't forget about our native plant rebate program. Fall is a great time to plant natives and each account is eligible for up to 10 plants and $10 off per plant. Our shopping list and further information is available on our website. We have recently expanded this offering to include shopping online or outside of Big Bear. And I do know that there's a native plant sale coming up maybe next week. Orchid may have some details on that. But do be careful. The plant species does need to match the exact same species on our list. If there are any questions, I'm always happy to take a call when you're out there shopping. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Orchid.
Welcome everyone, and thanks for showing up. Because we don't have that many people, I don't usually do this, but I will take questions during the presentation, although I probably will need help from you, Lauren, to let me know that I have a question relating to the slide. Yes, there is a native plant sale. It's the Saturday of Labor Day weekend. It's at Heaps Peak Arboretum. And that is just west of Running Springs. It starts, I think, at 9 a.m. and people line up, honestly, for an hour beforehand. So do not come at 10 a.m. and think there will be plants left, because there won't be. I'm pushing for an expanded plant, availability, but I'm not in charge. So I'm just advisory to them. So, but would love to see you. And if you came to this session, I hope you will say hi. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen and talk about water, why we are all here, and we can't be here without it. So can everybody see my screen now? Yes, yay. Okay. So this is a garden in Big Bear. Some of you have seen it. It's been on the tour lots of times. And I learned most of what I know about swales and earthworks and a lot of more great conservation stuff from Brad Lancaster directly from lectures. And I was lucky enough to take a workshop from him. And this is him pouring water on sand and showing us what a watershed is. I want to say that a lot of what I'm thinking about right now is from this idea of making the soil carbon sponge. And soil science is fascinating right now, although I'm not going to dip into that too far, but we don't want to leave our dirt bare. And this is kind of a challenge because, of course, they want us to clip back all our vegetation for fire, but we need there not to be bare compacted soil. So we'll talk about what we can put into our earthworks for our plants. Lots of you may have seen this slide. Most people don't know that bathtub ring is 185 feet high. And the news out of Colorado is, or the Colorado River Basin is not good this year. And they think we may have an El Nino next year, and that will be a tragedy for us. So the easiest way to deal with water is for everyone to ditch the lawn. And if you're at this presentation, you probably already know this, or maybe you already have done it. I always love the joke. I was told there would be no math, and we don't have to do a lot of math. And I have this worksheet online if you want to get it. But you can collect about 0.6 gallons of water per inch of rain falling on whatever surface. So if you have a rain barrel, you could collect 600 gallons of water per inch of rain. And what does that mean? Suppose you have 1,000 square foot cabin and Big Bear gets 20 inches of rain. That's 12,000 gallons. That's so big you wouldn't want it in your backyard. So people are like, well, why would I even bother having a rain barrel? Well, if your rain barrel is small, you're not even collecting a fraction of what you could collect from your roof. So upsizing your rain barrel is a great idea. 12,000 gallons would make a huge dent if everybody caught that much for their landscape use, for their personal use. But it gets even bigger if you are collecting it in the ground. And so that's the big focus, although I will talk a little bit about rain barrels. But you can collect 27,000 gallons of water per inch of rain falling on an acre of soil. And what does that mean for Big Bear? Let's think of what would be a small city lot. And a common lot in Big Bear would be 20 inches of rain times 1/10 of an acre times that 27,000 gallons is 54,000 gallons that you could be infiltrating in your yard that maybe you're not, and that's why you are here today. But that's a huge number. That's many times that, more than 4 times that what you could have caught on the roof. So we want to get that water that's that's hitting our ground, and we want to keep it there. And so here's what we don't want to do is pave everything. And this was permitted recently in the city of Sierra Madre, and I'm told that there are rain tanks underground so that they are catching all the water on the roof. But as we could see from our previous math, that's what they're catching on the roof is only a fraction or a quarter, less than a quarter of what they could be catching on the ground. So they have decided that parking is more important than water, and that's true just until we don't have any more. I don't want to go into this in depth, but this is the LA County low impact development, which you might be confused about that language, and I often am, but what it means is let's not impact the watershed. And so if you do things in LA County, if you do any landscaping over that 500 square feet, you have to at least do these things on the top. We won't talk about the things on the bottom, but you have to either have a rain barrel or permeable pavement or planter boxes or rain gardens or a dry well. And we'll talk about the rain barrels, the dry wells, the rain gardens, and we'll talk about permeable paving really quickly. So you in LA County and LA City, you must do one of these things if you do any landscaping at all. So here is, and all these slides from Brad Lancaster are used by permission. But on our left, we see the wasteful path to scarcity. I love how he writes. And basically we take our clean water from the roof, and instead of sending it to the plants, we send it around the plants, and then we send it around the plants again, and it never ever gets to the plants. And then we send it to the street where it gets really dirty with oil and brake linings and whatever else. And then we import some water with the hose and we water the plants with that. So that's kind of don't do this, but it is commonly how people do it. And instead we want to send the water from the roof of the house to a planted swale or rain garden. And a swale or a rain garden is just a depression. Don't get hooked up in our in the language. I'm here to demystify the language for you. And then we take our water from the sidewalk, which is also super clean, and we send it back to the depression, and we send it also to this other depression. And then we plant some native trees or some fruit trees in the depression. And then we also cut the curb, which I know Big Bear doesn't have a lot of curbs, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on curb cuts. If you have those questions, ask me later. But we want to bring all the water that's falling onto our vegetated depressions, and we can catch that 54,000 gallons of water that's falling on our lot that we're not catching now, and that we're paying for. So here's a curb cut. You can see that the depression is lower than the street, so rainwater soaks in. This is in Tucson, but they do exist in city of Los Angeles, and in Rosemead and Arcadia, they did an entire street project to do this. Here is thing one is mulch. Forest ecologies require mulch, and if you're in Big Bear, you most likely are in a forest ecology. And some people, some arborists suggest that even trees will drop their own leaves in order to provide mulch when they can't sustain them, because at least they can take care of their roots if they can't take care of their leaves. And this is Brent on about 10 yards of just ground shredded tree. And here is some plants going into a cardboarded situation. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because hopefully you don't have a lawn in Big Bear. And if you do, I'm glad you're here. But we often, in order to get rid of Bermuda and other invasive grasses, we'll often lay down cardboard and then put mulch on top of it. And instead of using something like glyphosate to kill the grass. So I do have information on this on my blog, and it is the top post. I don't blog very much. I'm usually just telling people where I'm speaking, but this slide is important for Big Bear. So this is a really steep, at least 1-in-1, and the homeowner said to her friend that she didn't think that anything could be planted here except the ugly ivy that was there before. But we put up this wattle, and you may be familiar with wattle from the freeways. We were doing wattle before the state of California decided that it is the right way, wattle and mulch. But you'll notice that these are all on a level. It looks like the street is going up, but actually it's heading downhill. And so each of these lines of wattle is on the level, and we're going to plant behind them. And it's kind of invasive looking, or, you're like, oh, I wish my neighbors would not do that. But the mulch does hide it. And it gives the plants just an edge to grow on a super steep slope. And we made this wattle by taking normally the jute that you would put across the slope and rolling it up lengthwise. So it's like 4 feet wide by 100 feet wide. So we went out into the street and rolled it up. And then we pulled level strings. So level is a big word in Swales, and you'll hear it a lot today. We pulled level strings and then put the wattle behind it. So this is kind of homeowner scale wattle, and it really does work. And it slows erosion, and it's much easier than your other options. So here is what it looks like right away, and it does disappear into the mulch. And once the plants grow, you really do not see it. And here it is on a different slope, and you can see the plants are just starting to grow in. And even though it is here in the center, you don't even really see that one. Up here in this deeper place, you can see it, but it's not what you notice first about this picture. And so here's from Brad Lancaster, and where would you use the wattle? And you would use it in places where the slope is so steep that you can't even really terrace. So when you get into this kind of steepness of slope, you can either use wattle and plants, or you can use engineered retaining walls. And engineered retaining walls get very expensive very fast. Does it fix your erosion? Maybe you do need an engineered retaining wall, but we like to start with soft erosion control like wattle. And so those orange circles represent the wattle on the right-hand side. And then we're gonna look at this slide again without the wattle and just think about the different strategies, and notice that you can only use swales at not super steep. When you get to medium steep, terraces really work better. And I have 2 clients in very similar soil. One of them terraced and one of them didn't. And the one who terraced, her garden grew in 3 times as fast as the one who didn't terrace. So terraces are an ancient historical way to solve the problems of erosion and slope and catching water. And if you just Google rice terraces worldwide, you can see lots of great images. And here, imagine if the slide previously, if that continued on toward the left, you can see that anywhere where there's a depression, we took the soil out of the depression and we put it to the left or downslope. So, and then as the slope becomes steeper, we might use a couple of rocks to stabilize things, and then a couple more rocks, but also lower in the watershed, the swales can be low and wide. But as we get steeper in the watershed, the swales get more narrow and a little deeper. And then as we get to about 2-in-1, not quite 1-in-1, the swales are going to just be a little bite. So there's just not going to be very much taken out. But it still makes a huge difference. And the higher in the watershed you take the action, the better off you are. So that little bite higher in the slope makes a lot more difference than the big bite lower in the slope. So here's what it would in theory look like in my goofy drawing. And then here is, we can see the idea of the water going in. But what I didn't represent is that this one really will help your garden more, the one on the right, higher up in the slope, than this one, but both of them will help. So depending on what you have, you just make your decisions. And then we want to vegetate our swales. We don't just want to cut some trenches in the landscape and then not add vegetation. Vegetation helps bring rain to your site, and the more vegetation that you can have that you don't have to pay for the water for. And when you think about your water bill, all you're really paying for is the infrastructure. The federal government subsidizes your water, and if you had to pay the true cost in water, there wouldn't be any lawns in Southern California at all. And notice where the trees are, they're on top of the swale. If they were fruit trees, they could be down in the swale, but if they're native trees, they need to be at the top of the swale. So here's an example of a low, wide swale. We'll see this picture again, but just right now we'll see that the swale depression is low and wide, and it's low in the landscape. And then here's a high narrow swale. So these swales are high in the landscape, and so they can't be wide. They're really like less than 6 inches wide each, but they make a huge difference in this landscape. And then here again is another example of a low wide swale that has just been planted. And we dress them up with river rocks, and we call them dry streams. Higher in the landscape, I don't think the rounded nature of river rocks is that beautiful, and we want to use the rocks that are more local. And so high on top of the mountain, that would be rocks that are less rounded and more jagged. So the mechanics of making a swale, so people hear the word planted bioswale and they're like, oh my God, I don't even know what that is, and how would I do that? Well, it takes a few tools. It takes a level, it takes some shovels and a tamper. And in this picture, the slope is up to the right and down to the left, and it's actually much steeper than you would see. So there are some rudimentary terraces here, but there still was a lot of issues with drainage. And a lot of times we come in just because, the drainage heads toward the house in all these foothill communities. and people built the house lower on the slope than the slope is. And so you can see that we made a little berm before the swale, and that's to help the citrus in the right hand. Then we have our swale, and then we have a little berm after the swale. And then you can see the most important part of this is the level. Like if I were carrying a bowl, if I don't carry it level, some of the water is going to leak out. So if I drop the bowl off to the right or to the left, the water is going to leak out that way. And so we use our level and we use our hose to make sure that our swales are level, which is to say parallel to the contour, just like contour lines on a map, and perpendicular to the slope. So we'll see a couple more examples that might help with this. Anyway, here is that same view where we have the slope off to the right. This is a different swale on the same property, a little higher up, but we have our level. We're pulling a string that is also level so that we know. And you don't have to buy a whole level. You can just use string and stake and a little line level. You don't really need, a line level is like $3. And you could have a $10 investment if you already have the tools. But we see that our swale is level, and we see our berm on the left-hand side here in the picture, just like the pictures that I showed you before. And the goofy drawing. So, and then we filled it with mulch. It could be filled with anything. It could be filled with gravel. You can't fill it back with dirt because that defeats the purpose, but gravel or mulch or, medium-sized rocks are fine. And so it almost disappears into the landscape. I feel like if we had put just a little more mulch, and this was just the cheapest shredded arborist mulch, what they would call a shredded tree. And if we had put a little more, you would never see this swale. I mean, I rather decorate them with rocks and make them beautiful, but everyone has a different budget and everyone has a different aesthetic also. So here's a different one. So the slope is sloping from at the top of the picture down towards us at the bottom of the picture. And most people, if they had gone to this site, wouldn't have really noticed that much about the slope. It's not steep at all. It's a very mild slope. And if nobody commented on it, you might not have said, oh, we are on a slope. In this iteration, we did want to make it look like a dry stream. So we planted a lot of juncus, which is this reed that's common in California and comes in a lot of flavors. And then we made up here a little meadow out of plants that also do grow in Big Bear that we'll talk about later. And so, but you can see that the swale comes through here, and we made just these little dishes. They're not even 6 inches deep sometimes. Well, probably they are 6 inches deep, but they're 2 to 3 feet wide. So we really had added the boulders and the juncus to make it look more like a swale than would have been obvious if we hadn't done that. And then you can see the water flow, and of course the house is down where we are, but we are catching all this water where the blue line is. And that's the water flow. And then we have made a dish. And so this would be really called a rain garden when you make a dish out of the soil, so, or a bowl out of the soil, then that is technically a rain garden. And then we took water from the roof of the garage over here and we piped it under the pathway and put it into that rain garden also. And then the avocado tree, which was dying and old, and should we take it out? And after that year, just 1 year later, it had all kind of new leaves on it, because rainwater is the best water. The water that we pipe in from somewhere else is never as good, because piping things in concentrates the salts in the water, and it's not as good for your hair or your plants. And here is our all important tools. You can see we used, we built little tiny river rock dams to slow the water down, not to stop it, just to slow it down, and just even one row of rock along across the slope. If all you ever did was put one row of rock across the slope, just like we did here, if it were a continuous rock, that would make a difference in your property and how much water it holds. And so you can see the dishing, and then you can see the path of the water, and you can see that we used a hose to make sure that the water was being held where we want it to be held. And then here is a picture of the meadow, not even 1 year later, and we have a few other native plants around the meadow. I don't like to just put in one kind of grass. I like to mix things up. And here is a picture of our juncus. And here is actually a plant that does grow in Big Bear, the Hooker's Evening Primrose. And behind it, some columbine, which is also native. And this was a great project. And after we did this project, I went back to do a little maintenance. And there were some chickadees who tried to drive me away from the pond and swale system that we built. They were like, hey, this is ours now, and you don't belong here. And so when you detain water, you can also create habitat. Here is what it looked like before, and you can see their nifty erosion control methods were totally working for them. Yeah, it wasn't. And you can also see the oleander, which also was not really working for them. And the house is down toward us, and the slope is away from us. And so we cut little tiny swales, again, not very wide, across the slope, and we reinforced the slope with a whole lot of river rock. Big trucks came with big pallets, and we had a crane for this, although you do not have to have a crane. There are people who can move rocks without that. And then it was also fully planned. So they always had a drainage problem, and the house was designed below the slope. And their big concern when we put in the garden was, oh, if we have to water the plants, won't this water that we're trying to put on the plants come down? And so this is why we put in the swales. And there's a closer up view. And this is what it looked like just, maybe 6 months after being planted. So it's just our slope, the swales, some rocks, and that big pile of mulch we saw earlier. And then here it is at about 6 months to a year. We have some growth in our native plants, not too much, but and then you can see it about 3 years later, how beautiful it looks in spring. And we have some dahlias and all kind of different plants. And this garden was on the Theodore Paint Garden tour for multiple years. And then we have a different view. This is a more technological solution where we took pipe and we made kind of an infiltrating French drain. And if you've never met a French drain, it's basically a ditch or trench with about 18 inches deep and about 9 inches wide, filled with gravel, with pipe in a sock. And the pipe carries water away from where you don't want it, but it can also carry water to where you do want it. And so this was in pretty heavy clay in Burbank, with somebody who worked with JPL in biodiversity. I didn't know that they do that there, but they do. It's not all just rocket science. But he helped me think about this. And so we have our traditional French drain, which is landscape fabric, gravel, pipe with perforations. So that's 4-inch perforated pipe. And the sock just keeps the dirt out. And that's what the landscape fabric here does. It keeps the dirt out. So it doesn't really work if it becomes all filled with soil again. But here is what a traditional French drain looks like. The pipe is at the bottom to carry water away as fast as it comes in. And so that water doesn't infiltrate. So we put the pipe at the top of our trench, and that allows the water to come in and infiltrate before it is carried away. Now, anytime you make a swale or have even a rain barrel or a rain garden, there should be a plan for the overflow, because some year we are going to have, you know, 100-year rain year. And of course, with climate change, those could happen more often and be alternated with really bad drought years. And so you have to always plan for an overflow. And so there is a curb cut in this where the overflow goes, and the pipe does help the overflow get to the street. But before that, we're infiltrating at least a foot worth of water. And so you can see once the water gets to the level of the pipe, then it is overflow and it can be taken out of the landscape. So we're not flooding the landscape, we're just infiltrating water. And so here's what that landscape looked like about a year and a half later. So this wasn't actually very long after, and they love grasses. And so we have deer grass and Gulf Coast muley. Some people call that pink hair grass. I don't use it as much because it takes a little more rain than you would think, and some manzanitas. And here's a different view of that same garden. And, you know, and we have a little bit of, this isn't lawn, this is a carex meadow in front. And so the part that is watered by that installation is over to the left. And then we have a dry well. So one of our things from our water monopoly game. And a dry well is a fancy name for a box of rocks. So this one is about 4 feet wide by a little more than 6 feet long. It's lined again in landscape fabric, and I'm not a fan of landscape fabric as weed cloth because it really, honestly, I can tell you it doesn't work. Ask me any question about that, I'm fine. But it does work to keep the silt, the really fine soil particles out of your water infiltration thing. So this is using rocks from the site, but we could have used rocks rocks we brought in. And in that case, we would usually use like 3/4 rock. And it doesn't have to be the rounded rock, just the jagged rock is fine. And then we wrap this up just as if it were a burrito in the end. And so this site, like many sites I work on, had no drainage plan. The city's drainage plan was plant some vinca. I'm not kidding. What can you do with that? Nothing. So of course the water just ran down the side of this slope and ended up here and was washing this away. So we have this, and we did put another one right where I'm standing to take the picture. So there's 2 of these dry wells in this project. And so here's the project to begin with. So dry well number 1 is up here on this flat to the left. Dry well number 2 is over here, and that is not vinca, it's Encilia. And then we have just the beginnings of a planted meadow. And we did some terracing with rocks also to contain the slope. So, and here it is after a couple of years with columbine and carex and really pretty. And this garden again was on the Theater of Pain tour many times. And here's some California buttercup, which does grow in Big Bear, and the carex also grows there. And here it is all grown in, and you can see, you know, how beautiful that can be. And so we have some coast bush sunflower and the buttercup and the columbine, and we caught a lot of water in order to do this. This is a lightly irrigated site, but it is all native, so not very much irrigation. Here's a different one where, again, drainage problem, water heading to the house. Most people, you know, who need these services need them right now. People are starting to do it just because, but in the beginning it was all, oh my God, the water is heading down to the house, which is 6 feet below this platform, which is where the street is. And so the previous people had left us a pile of rocks that they were going to make a dry stream out of and didn't, which was fine for us. We didn't have to bring them in. So we made 3 bowls, 1, 2, and then 1 is out of the frame. And then we filled them with gravel. and started planting Arjuncus because that makes things look like a dry stream to me, and some Carex and Penstemon Margarita Bop and other Penstemons. And so this does catch the water, and the water no longer does go down to the house. And we can see here the level of the street on the left, and the level of the house is 6 feet below over here. And so this installation catches that water that would go from the street to the house. So here it is in her pictures. So this is film, but she sent these to me later of what it looked like in spring. So once you plant it, it doesn't have to look like, you know, acres of gravel and rocks. We plant it and we start that living carbon sponge. And then here is on a rainy day, a rain garden at Theodore Payne. Actually, it isn't raining, just overcast. And this is before it all grew in. So you can see that all the dirt from this dirt road used to go down and make the neighbors crazy. And so they made some berms in the road and directed the water to this rain garden. And you can see a desert willow growing up in there. And again, the juncus, and one reason for the juncus is, and that's that reed growing up here, is it's tolerant of seasonal flooding. And I'll show you some other plants that are tolerant of seasonal flooding. So if you don't like that one, you're not stuck with it. And here's a rain garden in Tucson, in the Wildlands Conservancy headquarters. And here you can see they edged it with rock to keep it stable, but it is about a 1 foot or 15-inch depression. And then here's their overflow, and I'm sure this drains out somewhere else. So when the water gets to here, it's going to go in these holes and head somewhere else. So that's their overflow plan. And remember, there has to always be an overflow plan. I really should draw on these slides so you guys can see it. But anyway, they planted it with the native wildflowers to Tucson. So some penstemons, very similar to our penstemon, and different other vegetation. So here's a rain garden in Altadena. And so the water comes over here again, you know, minimal drainage plan, but the water comes from the left and infiltrates into these areas. And you can see this is after rain, and you can see that it's dry over here and wet down here. So it's dry to the left and wet to the right. And so you can see that it is working, and we do test them all. And then here is the beginnings of a Carex meadow. And Carex is one of the great plants that we use instead of lawns, just to, you know, for a little green area. It is tough enough to be played on though. So, you know, don't think it's too delicate. And then here's pictures of the rain garden afterwards. And we do have a little fast evaporating, so it doesn't draw mosquitoes, but that little bowl, so if it does rain, the birds do get a drink before all the water gets infiltrated. And you can see that bowl. And then we have a bunch of beautiful native plants, including some monkey flowers. And then here's what the meadow looks like afterwards. And if you make a dish out of the meadow, it holds more water longer, and that helps the grasses to grow also. They're not really grass, but anyway. And so the beginnings of the garden also. And then what do you do if you have existing trees and you want to get them more water? So when I was a kid in the mountains, and I grew up going to close an area near Lake Arrowhead all my life, and still live there. And when I was there as a kid, the earth was dark and rich and wet, and I could sink into it. And that's not true now. But our plants, our trees grew up in that kind of wetter ecology. So we need to bring them water. So you can make very shallow swales outside of the tree canopy. So the tree canopy is how far the leaves stretch is the tree canopy. So you don't want to make it under the tree canopy because the roots are there. So if you go outside of the tree canopy and make a swale below it, because the tree will know that there's water there, and a little tinier swale above it, you can help your trees to be healthier on your property, and they will reward you with nice green growth. And so we might take that soil and we would dump it up on either side, and then where it gets deeper, we'd use a couple little rocks to stabilize that up. And again, we're trying to do this, you know, with our line level or our level, so that these swales are level. And then we plant them with small vegetation to stabilize them. And here's an example of a hillside swale that's really, you know, these swales are just not much deeper or wider than the shovel head. And you can see again our level, our line level, and what it looks like with the water in it. I don't have ending pictures of this one, but you can see the process anyway, and you can see this was going to be another little meadow. And then from Brad Lancaster, what if you feel like digging is not in the interest of your trees? You could also just use mulch and make a berm. So there's more options, and I'm just showing everyone just a little taste of what you could learn or how you could think about your landscape. But detaining the water any way you can is better than not detaining water. So then I don't want to talk a lot about hugelkultur, but since we have a lot of branches, you can put a lot of branches in the berm, and that does boost the ecology, and soil is made out of microbes. And the more microbes, the more soil carbon. And that's going to save us over time if we can have the carbon in the soil and not outside of the soil. And then here's one where we took the driveway and we put that same or a very similar French drain system. So the gravel, the tube, the everything. And we took it from the driveway here, which is again higher than the house. And so impacting the house siding. And then we took it all the way to the backyard where we put it into this meadow. And then there's the meadow later. And the kids played on it. So fully, this is about 6 months, so it's not fully grown in. We left it floppy. You can mow it, but who would? It does take a lot less water, and it does not need the kind of fertilization that that grass needs. And so I do have this in my handout. If you want the handout, I'll tell you where to get it. Or if you just Google my name, you can find it. My name and native plants. Then I like to mix little wildflowers into our meadows, and these are all native to Big Bear, the blue-eyed grass, the achillea, and the sedge. And then the aquilegia, we saw that. So the columbine grows well in our swales. Blue grama should be not quite down in the swale. The scarlet monkey flower, you can see that in ditches around the alpine circle if you just want to go look at one. I'm sure they're blooming now. And that's true for the creek monkey flower is also growing in those ditches, you know, above Big Bear to the west in the alpine circle. So these are all Big Bear native plants, easy to grow. They do need some water if they're not in a swale. And if your swale is dry, they need some water anyway. So you do have to get water to them somehow. The juncus and the carex need less water, but our hookers, evening primrose, also some water. But here's a nice picture of the juncus. Our native rose does grow up here. Woodsii ultramontana. The buttercup grows great in the swales. And of course, the goldenrod, which is so important for butterflies at this time of year. And then here is a little seep fountain. And down at Tree of Life Nursery, which is one place you could get all these plants down in San Juan Capistrano. And it really is worth the day trip. You can wander around and see the San Juan Creek. And so these are different monkey flowers. And then a simple rain barrel. This is the one that City of Los Angeles gives out with a rain chain above it. And again, this is only 55 gallons out of that, out of that 12,000 gallons you could get. So a larger one is better if you can have it, or you can put these in series. You can hook them up with little hoses. So here's a 300 gallon one. These people were very straight looking, accountant, a mom who used to be in marketing, but they had solar panels and they had this 300 gallon rain barrel that they used to water their vegetable garden. And I took this picture because I thought it just does look exactly like trash bins. So it's not any uglier than trash bins anyway. And a little thing that you could get from Gardener Supply that just cuts into your gutter. So that's the easiest way to hook up your rain barrel. Just cut right into the gutter. It has a float. So when the rain barrel is full, the water goes down the gutter. And then you can see that hose comes right in there. And then this would be the overflow, but since we have the gutter system, that's the overflow. And then some people like to put a first flush diverter so that all of the water that comes into your tank is really clean. And I'll take questions about that if you need that. And then here's the out that's going to their vegetable garden. Here's another larger size, like 1,000 gallons in Glendale. And this really does make a difference in the water you can collect. The difference between 55 gallons and 1,000 is substantial, but you do need a really sturdy platform. As you can see, there's a sturdy platform for this. And then they terraced, and this is this guy's vegetable garden that's being fed from the drip from that large cistern. And here's a different one made of culvert pipe at the Wildlands Conservancy. And here is some permeable paving in the city of LA Park. But you can see that the water comes down this slope, and then there's a baffle before it heads down into the stream. So it cleans the water also on the way, it detains the water and it cleans the water on the way to the creek that leads to the stream. And then here is just a new revegetation of this creek and our $1 million trash catcher on the left. Permeable paving collects leaves and it collects dust and it collects silt. So if you install permeable paving, you have to vacuum it with your shop vac. If you don't do it, it's going to be impermeable quickly. So something to think about. And then I'm not going to spend too much time on watering, but we like drip with micro sprayers, especially to establish. We don't use traditional drip, but the little micro sprayers or what they call umbrella sprayers are the best. We sometimes do drip on grid, but honestly, most people do an ugly job of this. It's best if it's below grade. Our favorite water saving head is the MP rotator. And if you have a house also down the hill, your city may pay you to change your sprinkler heads to this. So takes a lot fewer sprinkler heads. And we also use rotors on hillsides. Then, since we've taken the water out of the system with our lawn, we like to add some water back in, and other dry cultures do this. So we have different little rock fountains. We have a fountain for a hummingbird. And if you have a fountain, it must be, a recycling fountain, and then you will have wildlife. And any kind of water will bring the wildlife. And that was the band-tailed pigeon. And then we have our seep fountain, another seep fountain, not, I would say, strictly legal. Well, the city that it's in does not care. And but it does bring the wildlife. And so everything needs water. We'll talk about that next Wednesday. And now if there are any questions, I will take questions. Are there no questions? Chat.
All right, I'm taking a look
Sprinkler
here.
replacement, yay. Okay.
So right now I don't see any questions. If anyone has a question, feel free to put it in the Q&A box or in our chat. Or you can raise your hand and I'll allow you to talk. Questions or comments? Sierra does bring up a good point. We do have a sprinkler head replacement program. If you want to replace your sprinkler heads, bring those in. And we offer up to $2 per sprinkler replace if it's WaterSense certified. More information is on our website there.
Okay, so if we have no questions, I'm just gonna type in where you could get the handout. And that's there's a resources page, and the handout is on there on the resources page. So if you want to be able to do that same math, or if you want to know the book resources, are Brad Lancaster's Rainwater Harvesting for Drylands. So I hope that this was valuable to you, and we'll see you next week for pollinators.
I do have a question actually
Okay.
for you. So you were talking about building these rain gardens and swales, and then the plants and meadows usually come up about a year later. When do you typically plant? How do you incorporate? Do you put seeds in? Do you plant them from pot? And at what point during the process do you do that?
So we plant from pots. We often will seed over our plantings from pots. We plant in 4-inch and 1 gallon, and sometimes we plant smaller, like rose pots, depending on what availability is. And we do it right then. We plant right away, we mulch right away. And then we'll put seed on top typically in October. We'll add seed. Usually if I'll run out, on the day of the first rain. You don't have to do it that way. If the rain is coming, you could do it before the rain. And we will seed just really common wildflowers right into the mulch. So we plant right away, and we do add some seed because it's easier, but a lot of these plants are really very available from nurseries like Theodore Payne or Tree of Life or the California Botanical Garden, which their nursery opens sometime in October. Or you could come over to Heaps Peak and get them from us. Bring your Big Bear list, although everything will be high elevation hardy plants.
And then I do know that some of our local nurseries offer seeds as well. And it sounds like now is the time to start thinking about, seeding and putting in plants. Fall is a great time. So our native plant rebate program does cover seeds as well. So take advantage. I was really inspired by a lot of the pictures. So thank you. Any other comments, questions, quiet group? All right, well, if you decide that you have any questions after class, feel free to email us at conservation@bblbwp.com, and we'll try and take care of those for you as soon as possible. Next week, Orchid will be back. Orchid Black will be back for her next class, which is creating habitat for wildlife. And I've been looking forward to this one all summer long. So hope you guys can join. Email us if you want to save a spot. And thanks for coming today. With that, wishing you all a safe and great rest of your week.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Okay.